Excuse me for that. Thank you all for coming. In 1964, Malcolm X said the following: "In this present administration, they have in the House of Representatives 257 Democrats to only 177 Republicans. They control 2/3 of the House vote. Why can't they pass something that will help you and me? In the Senate, there are 67 senators who are of the Democratic Party. Only 33 of them are Republicans. Why? The Democrats have got you sewed up. They've got the government sewed up, excuse me, and you're the one who sewed it up for them. And what have they given you for it? 4 years in office and just now getting around to some civil rights legislation. Just now, after everything else is gone, out of the way, they're going to sit down now and play with you all summer long, the same old giant con game that they call filibuster. And all those are in cahoots together." What's changed in 46 years? According to royal family legend, a new wife of Henry XIV, when learning of the plight of the peasants during one of the many famines, said, "Let them eat cake." The phrase is usually attributed to Marie Antoinette, but historians agree that Jean-Jacques Rousseau was mistaken in attributing it to her. The point is an illustration of elite indifference to mass suffering. The French aristocracy was so oblivious to the suffering of the French people that they didn't understand what it meant to be out of bread. At the time, the average peasant, French peasant, spent 40% of their income just on bread. Some economists estimate that the maldistribution of wealth in the United States will resemble that of Mexico by 2040, a mere 30 years from now. How many of you sitting here now or listening to me later are prepared to live in a dirt floor shanty like the peasants of Mexico? It is an insult to human dignity everywhere that anyone should have to live that way anywhere. What do these historical references have in common? Both involve social change. In the case of America in the 1960s, we achieved some measure of change, and the situation did not devolve into armed conflict, though it very well could have, as Malcolm was warning us. In the case of France in the 1700s, things went very differently. Revolutionary France was a bloodbath. It was horrible, it was violent, it was murderous, and it was callous, and yet it produced some measure of democracy. But democracy is a fragile thing. It does not survive a populace that is uneducated. It does not survive a populace that has no time to keep up with current events. It does not survive extreme differentials in wealth either. Though France was actually going through the equivalent of our revolution, the context was very different, because in France, the peasants revolted, not just bourgeois intellectuals. Why do I mention all this now? Because we are heading down that road of self-destruction. Our political culture is broken, having been mangled and abused by decades of official indifference. What is most insulting is not just that this indifference is indifference to suffering, which it is. No, this indifference appears, at least to this man of letters, as indifference to reason. Democracy is about a conversation, a reasoned conversation in which all people decide complicated issues. We do not have a democracy in this country because we do not have conversations. The Republicans and Democrats are not competent to converse because they do not know how to base their policies in reason, let alone science. They are not competent to govern because they do not know what it means to govern democratically. The people must decide the weighty issues of the day, and sometimes what the people decide is different from what any one individual might like, but that is democracy. There is hope, though, not the empty hope of lies about change. The hope is the American people. As in 1964, when Malcolm was speaking, the American people in 2010 are expressing their frustration and outrage. We, have had enough of the two-party system and its business-as-usual theatrics that pass for an exercise in democracy. We deserve better. We deserve politicians who are honest enough to recognize when they are in the minority and have the integrity to live with that. We deserve a political culture based on democratic participation and democratic decision-making, not spin doctors, talking points, and horse races that masquerade as elections. We were promised a democracy, and we want it now. The possibility of real change exists here and now in a way it is not before. The people of Washington State have decided to conduct a new experiment in primary elections. To that end, we passed a top two primary system. This was challenged and eventually upheld by the Supreme Court, and this year we will try it out for the very first time in a US Senate race. It will not work quite as voters and proponents expected, though. The two corporate parties have moved their conventions to June and will endorse their candidates then. Of the dozen or so names floating around this race, only two of us are not trying to get the Republican endorsement, the incumbent and myself. It's possible that a Republican, one of those Republicans, could decide to run without party endorsement, but that would be political suicide. It is highly unlikely. This primary will probably be a three-person race for those top two spots. This is radically different from how elections have worked in the past. It is possible now for an independent to win in Washington. Before this change, that would be a practical impossibility, but now there is no spoiler issue. The voters of Washington can vote their values, as we all should in a democracy, and the top two will go on to the general election. I intend to be among the top two, and believe that in a head-to-head race with the incumbent, that I will easily best any Democrat, because the people have had enough of politics as usual. Finally, in closing, let me note that today, the government of El Salvador will, for the first time ever, recognize the crime that was the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero, who said these words mere seconds before a US paid assassin put a bullet through his heart. May this body, immolated, and this blood, sacrificed for humanity, nourish us also, that we may give our body and our blood over to suffering and pain, like Christ, not for self, but to give harvests of peace and justice to our people. This year, things will change. Thank you.